Staying in love through massive change, if in one of the partners, is challenging, no matter what kind of change it is, whether it's depression, mental illness, um, PTSD. It doesn't matter what kind of change. And people, it's not unusual for people to ask themselves, who is this person and how can I make it through this with them? That's not who I married or fell in love with. And the most massive change I could think of would be gender transition. Because that the person really is wanting to be, and not the person you married. So I began talking with a colleague of mine, another psychologist who worked extensively with transgender couples and individuals. And she had collected a lot of interviews with women who chose to stay in their marriages. And so I took those and collapsed them into a single character. And that was Pat.
Mm. So, and it's lovely. One of the choices you made. So, to backtrack just a little bit and give people a brief synopsis of what the show is about. Pat, it's a one woman play, one-hander. Janet, you play Pat in this production, in this film. And Pat has been married to her soulmate, Sam, for 40 years. And Sam spends a lot of time away on business. And so he writes her a letter expressing to her that he's going to transition and become a woman. And this has been something he's been hiding for all these years. And it's her reaction to this it's a 3-year, the play takes place over 3 years, Sharon. Is it a 3-year?
Yes.
It's Pat's reaction to what is happening. And Sam's definitely a character. Sam Sheila is her name once she transitions, is a character, but not one that you see, just one that you hear a lot about. So Sharon, I do want to ask you this. One of the choices you made as a playwright was to make this a one-woman play, to look at this through the lens of Pat and this relationship and this catharsis, honestly, that Pat goes throughout this play. And I read somewhere in doing my research that the reason you wanted to look at it through Pat's point of view and not bring Sam into it as a character on stage is because of the judgment factor. You didn't want, so talk to me a little bit about that. Speak to that a little bit.
I only wanted people to see Sheila through the eyes of the woman who loved her. Because people will, it's not unusual for people to judge trans people because they look different from them. Not all the time, ultimately, but certainly in the process often. I didn't want that to happen. I wanted people only to see this person that Pat loved. And being unable to distance in that way, I hope that they would engage more with who Sam Sheila is, not what she looks like, or whether it's acceptable to do what she is called to do. I wanted there to be the audience to be intimate and up close with both of them and not give them the opportunity to distance.
I'm so glad that you mentioned the audience, Sharon, because Janet, I can imagine this show on a stage. I didn't see it as a stage play, but the audience really becomes a character in this piece because Pat spends the entire show either doing this inner monologue or speaking directly to the audience. So talk to me as a performer, and it speaks so much to what we're going through in this pandemic right now, because so many actors don't have an audience. Talk to me about stripping away the audience and just playing that to the camera. Does that change the performance at all?
It did not. It did not. When I performed it as a play, I found myself drawn to making eye contact with the audience, which, as I understand it, is a little unusual. And if you hold it too long, it can make people uncomfortable. But it felt very confessional to me. And maybe it was lack of experience and I don't care, but I felt the desire to make that connection from person to person. But in filming it, I was thinking of speaking very much to my lifeline best friend. And you're right, it's either an inner monologue, and in those shots, I'm not looking directly at the camera. And then the way Jerry directed it, when I'm speaking to my friend, I'm looking directly into the camera. So you should be able to distinguish that really well in the film. No, it felt very natural to me. And the writing in this is brilliant. Over 3 years, I keep uncovering more and more and more. And what I love about this is so much of the general public doesn't really understand body dysphoria or transitioning. And we're seeing it through the lens of somebody who's also confused and shocked by this. And we see it step by step, the building of the understanding and the building of the empathy, and then going to bat for Sam and Hishi and Sheila with friends and with family and helping other people through it. It's really, in today's terminology, the building of an ally from that point of what the heck to I get it, I get you, and now I understand what we are regardless of gender, and also what we're not.
Sharon, you wrote this as a stage play. It's been adapted into this lovely film. Talk to me about this collaborative process, and have you learned anything about the play that maybe any new discoveries that you hadn't discovered about it before in adapting it for the screen?
The play was meant to travel, so it was very stripped down when I wrote it. And it has been amazing seeing it opened up into the home where they live. I think that really increases the intimacy, and it's a very intimate play. I was also pleased that in seeing it in a home, it's as though the audience gets to know Pat and Sam Sheila as friends, so that it becomes people you know, which I think is important, because transitioning gender is not something that happens out there. Everyone in every group of people, there are folks who choose that. So it was lovely to see it opened up in that way. There were particular scenes. I loved both the scene in the bar and the scene where you beat the bejesus out of that truck. Now there's a teaser for you. This lady beats up a truck. And being able to see the dialogue opened up in those particular settings was a delight. So it just expanded the options for performance enormously.
Well, and I think in terms of set, it's filmed in this, a good part of it is filmed in this beautiful home, and there's artwork on the walls, and you get drawn in. The artwork almost becomes a character. And there's just so many layers with the artwork, the music. It just is a very layered piece. And I'm not sure if you were just on a static set or no set on an empty stage that you would get those layers as much as you do here. Janet, you're kind of nodding. Do you agree with that?
This was a really pleasant part of the creative process. You know, all the artwork that you see they're pieces in my home, and as Jerry was considering how to open it up and what scenes would be appropriate in which rooms and which outside, the artwork became part of the focus. You know, we wanted to bring in some symbolism of different types. So some sculptural pieces, some wall art, inside and out, those come into play. So as you do it, you might want to pay attention to that. Also, really interestingly, this was a very, very difficult piece of light because there are so many windows. It's a modernist house. And we had to be very careful about where the lights were placed so that the reflection would enhance rather than interfere. We need to make sure they weren't visible. Also, there are multiple mirrors. And I think he might have used every single mirror in the house. We definitely used every room, including hallway and attic and all the depth surfaces. But it was complex to shoot for the lighting, but it also allowed for reflections in the windows, in the mirrors, in the hallway tap dancing scene. You can actually see if you look 4 different images of that. Yeah, and that was all intentional. He put so much thought and care into this, and the cinematography is, I believe, just astounding. For this 1 hour play. So
it's lovely, and it definitely transcends the stage. It is not filmed on a stage. It feels very cinematic. It feels very film worthy. I guess that's it feels very cinematic. Sharon, I have a question for you. I find another choice you made here was not only to make this a one woman, one hander play, but to also have this marriage have spanned 40 years. So it's not a 4-year marriage, it is a 40-year marriage. Can you talk to me? Like I said, when I watched it, I was watching it through the lens of having my own anniversary next week and having been with this man that I'm married to for almost 30 years. And I think about how our love story has evolved over that time. Could this story have worked if they were newlyweds or if they were younger? Does it add an extra layer or dimension because they have this long relationship?
Yes, I think so. Certainly, marriages go through a partner's transition when they're early too, but I wanted to emphasize that their roots had grown together. That to uproot that connection would be extremely difficult. And so the motivation to work on it, to make it good for both of them, would be really deep and strong. I mean, it's hard to imagine uprooting something that old without damaging part of it or killing it. So I wanted them to really want to make this work.
I love that so much. And Janet, what about you? Do you think that the length of their relationship and the marriage adds to the poignancy of this piece?
Oh, yes. You know, we were talking about how Pat doesn't give up.
Mm.
You could say no to that, but you can't resign. I think part of that is her character, but part of it is, and how deeply she fell in love with Sam so early, soulmates. But yes, the length of the relationship, having gone through so much. You know, I too was married almost 30 years, and you don't just stop something like that easily. You're right. When you kill something like that, you kill part of yourself. You know? So those are hard choices. So yeah, she was forced to, I think it's this particular trauma in a marriage is, I think, really interesting because unlike some other types of impact on marriage, she was shaken up having to look at Sam in a very new way. And as much as that shakes the foundations of everything, to be able to question everything at that point rather than just one particular element of the marriage, I think, in a way, maybe for a resilient person, for a dedicated, loving person, that maybe gives it a better shot because you're having to look and re-examine everything, your own identity as well, which it does.
Yeah.
And what is love anyway? What is our love? What remains for us? Oh, I adore Pat. We're very different. Pat's very expressive. I talked to my best childhood friend last night who'd seen it, and she said, it was so hard for me because you would never react that way. You would meditate on it. Yeah, well, sorry, that was that.
And there is a scene where she is kind of meditating, and I'm just waiting for you to throw that Buddha across the, like after hitting the truck and beating up the truck, I'm just waiting for that Buddha to be sacrificed somehow.
I mean, everything. One thing I really love about Pat is that she is so creative. You know, she tries virtually everything to recover the relationship, her understanding of Sam. She tries everything to break out of her funk. Yeah, and we see her through all those moments. And what I love about this too is it's over 3 years. And if you think about 3 years in your own life, what snippets would you choose that are 1 to 2 minutes long? And these are powerful, powerful moments. And speaking of that truck scene, I was seriously bruised after that. I didn't hit the truck in every take. So it has a temper too. And I tell you, after 8 takes in that scene, my heart was racing. I was glad I was not like Pat because that was really uncomfortable. A bad feeling.
I'm curious, Janet, too. Last week, I interviewed Tara Nicole Williams, and we were talking about intimacy direction and the importance of intimacy directing in filmed, virtual, Zoom, streamed performances. And one of the things she was bringing up is you have cameras in your home. Typically, if you're at a theater, there is a separation between your stage space and your personal space. Here, there wasn't. You're filming in your home. So talk to me about how you and Jerry were you able to have any separation of stage and space? Because this is the emotional journey that Pat goes on, how do you release from that at the end of a day of filming? Because it's
Oh,
different.
that's an excellent question. I'll tell you one thing that Jerry has learned techniques to release characters from your body. He's done standardized patient work and it's taught there, but also, you know, through decades and decades of acting and directing, he knows that you cannot hold that in your body and recover. And, you know, we were going from one day shooting some of these very emotional scenes. The scene in the bathroom when she learns he's set the date for the surgery was the worst scene for me. The very first, my eyes were swollen the next day with that one. I had to be able to release that. It's incredibly difficult to be Pat. You know, we as humans, I'm amazed that we can go through such horror in our lives and bounce back in large part, but we don't do it alone. That's the other thing I loved about this play is that she does learn who to rely on, who to lean on through this. And I think that's important for anyone trying to navigate this or caring for somebody who's navigating this. People shouldn't have to do this completely alone. And I didn't go through it alone. Jerry helped me shake it off, in essence. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yes. Because, you know, that's what I was thinking about too, when I was seeing these, like Sharon said, you're in their space, you're in their home, but it's not a set. It is a home. It's a home.
No, Pat gives it all and bears it all. She's just the kind of person. So being that in each scene was just part of being the character. Is that fun?
Yeah, absolutely. Sharon, I read an article that you wrote talking about being a teller of healing stories. We are living in a crazy divided time right now. Are you in Atlanta? Are you in Atlanta as we speak? Because that's the center of division right now. It seems like in this country. That is the epicenter. Does the theater have a role in healing its audience or helping bring people together, do you think?
Absolutely. There were quite a number of trans men and women who came to the show when it was done in Atlanta. And for them, having their stories told with such care and attention was very moving to them. And had the privilege of speaking with several couples who'd been through the process. And I was happy to know that they could relate to a lot of what they had seen. I think there is something healing about being listened to closely and accepted and understood. And it may not be political movement, but for the individuals who participate in that, I think there's a real piece of healing in there. So yes, I do think theater plays a role. You know, I was a psychologist, a psychotherapist, so I was approached from the perspective of, would I want one of my clients going through this to see this? So the intention was always that there was ultimately some healing piece of it, hopefully, for people who had walked that path. And hopefully for people who had been through struggles in their marriage. I heard from folks that was also meaningful to them as well. So yes, I do think theater has a role.
Okay. Sharon, let me go back to the last question. Do you think this play reads differently during this pandemic or during this year in which so many trans people have been attacked violently?
I think there are a couple of ways that it's different. We have all had so many losses this year. Here's Pat navigating potentially enormous loss. I mean, it's another level of if you can't be with anybody, do you want to lose the person you're with? So that's, I think, a piece of it. We've all gone through changes in our lives that were totally unexpected, that we didn't ask for, that we can't control, like Pat. So I think there's some resonance here that there wasn't when the play was first written. And I think the other piece of it for me is that there's so much judgment and divisiveness and ugliness abroad in the world right now that I think it makes their story that much more poignant and vulnerable. To be able to take that risk to be who you are in a time where judgment has consequences that may be dangerous.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, you know, what Janet and I were talking about is we can learn so much from Pat about coping through grief and loss and loneliness and isolation. There's something very telling about seeing this character in her house alone, you know, as we're navigating this. And at one point she says, if I can just make it through today, I'll stay. And so I think that just speaks to what we're going through right now. I love that. Well, this is such a lovely, I'm a sucker for a good love story. And so this is such a lovely love story about marriage and love and resilience. And I really feel like female empowerment. I feel like Sheila definitely finds her strength, but seeing Pat go through this catharsis and be empowered as a woman is really beautiful in this play. So I would encourage everybody to watch the film. You can watch it from the comfort of your own home. You can watch it this weekend. It's a lovely conversation starter. It's just a lovely story. So thank you, Sharon, for giving us this beautiful story. And thank you, Janet and Jerry and Justice Theater Project for bringing it to a screen so more people can see it. I mean, that's the beauty of virtual streams, is it becomes widely available. So